Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is the shape of language. This is such like cutting edge stuff. It's so cool. We're going to be talking about language and AI and learning and conceptualization, all that good stuff, and maybe even interspecies communication. So it should be a lot of fun. And before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And this time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, all your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together and vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the pressure, the temperature, the motion, and the tickling and tingling when you stop. And allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, Rosalind. Good morning to everybody else who's joining us. So good to have you here with us. Rosalind, I so appreciate you being part of our chat on a daily basis. It's wonderful, wonderful to be able to have your presence with us and everybody else who's joining us. So today we're talking about the shape of language. I've been fascinated by this AI thing, the dangers posed by it, and also the remarkable breakthroughs that are available through it. And so I was watching this wonderful thing on YouTube. Let me just see if I can, I don't know how I can get the link to you. Maybe I can. Let me see. But anyway, I'm going to share what it was about. Yeah, I think I might be able to. Let me just see. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to copy the link and I'm going to put it in the chat and hopefully you'll be able to see it. Let's see. Tell me if you saw my entry into the chat. Good morning. Good morning, Dido. So good to have you here with us this morning. I just put a link to a YouTube video in the chat, and I don't know if you all are able to see it. I'm hoping so. It's a fabulous presentation by, let me see, it's called AI to Decode Animal Communication. And it's from, okay, so you can see it. That's awesome. It's from the Humane Canada Summit. And so the person who's put on that presentation is an AI expert. And I had watched another video warning from him and his business partner about the dangers of AI and why we really need to rein it in until we can get a better sense of it. But the video that I just sent the link to is about how AI is being used to communicate or start to decode things from other species. But first, he talks about language. Now, I don't know if you've seen the movie Arrival. It's a remarkable, remarkable movie. I recommend you check it out. And it's about an alien species coming to the planet and trying to understand their language. And it gives us tremendous insight into what are the underpinnings of language and how do we understand it. So one of the things that they've discovered, that the thing that is the game changer with AI that has revolutionized the whole thing is that I think he said in 2017, they developed this large language model. And what that large language model has done is scraped information throughout anything that was digital that's available linguistically, and compiled it and mapped it. And what happened was that they started identifying geometric relationships between words. So this is fascinating. The example that he gives in the video is the relationship between man and king. Let's say it's this distance. And then they find that the relationship between woman and queen is a similar distance. And then girl and princess, and boy and prince. So Dido, thank you. Dido posted a link for the movie Arrival. It's fabulous. I so recommend it because I have so many thoughts right now that it's hard to get them all organized to be coherent. So I'm hoping this makes some sense as we talk it through. But the thing with Arrival is that this linguist begins to understand the language, and as she understands the language, all of a sudden she's unanchored in time. So all of time exists all at the same time, and she's able to be experiencing past and future because these other beings have this consciousness, and their language represents those concepts and that experience. And so in her understanding of the language, her experience of life is expanded. That's really kind of the bottom line or punchline to this conversation. So going back to AI, finding these relationships between these different words, and what he's talking about is how we make meaning, and it's through association. So there are all kinds of relationships around any given word, and all of this geometry that creates an actual kind of structure. And then if we take that out further and further, a whole language has a shape, is what they determined. And interestingly enough, they found that human languages have very similar shapes. And within that shape, there is, let's say there's a place for dog, and we can look at a similar place in the shape of another language and find the word for dog. And given not every language might have the word for dog, so it's not necessarily a reliable one-to-one pairing. But what's interesting is that the geometry of the shape is such that one point on the map on one language matches as a point on a map of another. So this is just crazy, crazy fascinating in and of itself. And then they discovered that they could map pretty much any other data as a language. So not that it's going to fit the shape of the human language, but that they could use the same principles to map other data, and they're applying it to things like DNA and other information. So we're going to stretch over into interspecies communication. The way that this model of language and intelligence, and this is excuse me, how AI is able to give us answers and simulate or generate new language, is because it has the understanding of this very complex model and is able to see all these interrelationships. So by collecting all kinds of information from the sounds of animals, like whales, for example, with a large enough sampling, they can start to decode, or potentially start to decode, the information that is being transmitted in these with the animals. So another example that was given that was amazing was about plants, and that there was a particular plant that they played different sounds for. And I don't know how this necessarily relates to AI, but AI is kind of a magic decoder ring in its way, right? And over time, it will become more and more capable at being able to pick out these differences. So anyway, they played different sounds to a plant, and they played the sound of bats, of jets, of all different sounds, and then they played the sound of a pollinator. And when the plant heard the sound of the pollinator, it started producing sweeter nectar. So that was evidence that there is something going on, that the plant is able to detect different sounds or different sources. Maybe it's a frequency thing, maybe it's an energetic thing on another level. We've been talking about different kinds of perception that we have, and certainly that other species have. So one of the boundaries to being able to more deeply understand language from other species is being able to get those samples. And they talked about being able to separate when there is a lot of conversation going on between multiple animals, how to be able to separate out those sounds. So they gave an example of two dogs barking, and they were using AI, which is pretty remarkable. They were able to separate out those separate barks. And that is sort of a quantum leap to being able to distinguish the patterns within the language that's being spoken. So it's just endlessly fascinating. So another recommendation for you to check out, it seems that it's only on Apple TV. It's a documentary that I just started watching it. Again, I've been watching all kinds of stuff this morning. It's called Fathom, Fathom. And it is about a woman trying to decode the language of whales, particularly, I think, the sperm whale. And they, as far as I got, one of the things that was fascinating is they were trying to map this language, and it came out to be a circle. And watching that reminded me very much of the movie Arrival, and the way that they were perceiving and also trying to decode the language of the alien species. It's so interesting. So anyway, the whales, this one representation was a circle, and it made me consider the notion that was being put forward in Arrival, about time and all of time existing in this whole, and that our perception of the world is bounded by our language. We were talking yesterday about how the mind is a limiting factor rather than an expansive factor, that it's sorting information out. It's discarding information rather than perceiving all of it. It's eliminating a lot, like our perceptions eliminate a lot rather than expand into understanding or perceiving everything that's here. And so language is a limiter in many ways. So Dido says, I found an IMDb article about the documentary Fathom. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that so much, Dido. If you have an Apple TV subscription, you can watch it on your phone. And there might be like a trial Apple TV subscription that you can get to be able to watch it. But and I haven't watched the whole thing. I think it looks pretty cool from what I've seen so far. But what we're talking about is that our reality is shaped by language. And if you think about when we're growing up, lots of us have had imaginary friends or seen things that we were then told don't exist, or experienced different things that we didn't know existed, and or that we were told don't exist. And there are certain topics that we're trained into thinking about as taboo. We talked about spells. There's this cultural spell that's cast upon us that kind of tells us how reality is, what's real, what's not real. And those of us who see things that other people don't see, there's more acceptance for that now, I guess, that it's okay to be able to see angels, and maybe fairies, and still, even though there's been a public disclosure, the ET thing carries a lot of stigma. I would imagine that the angel thing probably carries stigma, and fairies as well. People who can see auras, people who are really capable of communicating with animals and plants consciously. All of those people are kind of stepping outside of the, we want to call, maybe stepping outside of or pushing the limits of the shape of our language. And I find it so fascinating to be thinking about language as having a shape. Anybody who speaks multiple languages will acknowledge that it's a different perception of the world, that there's a different sensibility about different languages, and the feeling toward life. That said, isn't it even more fascinating that the shapes of these languages are so similar? But then, we share so much DNA, like with mushrooms or with primates, and there's only a little difference, but that little difference is universes, right? So I'm so deeply fascinated by this idea of the shape of language, and also what would happen to shift that shape. And what I wonder if there's a way to be able to recognize, maybe not yet, but eventually I would imagine that with AI potentially, to recognize what those nuances are. So there are many, many positive and powerfully positive potentials for AI, for connecting us with the world. And at the same time, it only takes one bad actor, right, to abuse something, to turn a technology into something that could be devastating. And one of the things that they talked about in the cautionary tale around AI is that AI is self-learning, so it can accelerate its learning exponentially by improving its performance. It can continue to iterate in a way that it becomes perhaps potentially all-knowing. They call that the singularity. It's not just that AI can become all-knowing. It's that it can be directed to actually do things when it's connected to the internet and different services and finances, etc. So somebody could be saying, programming to say, do this thing, and it can put all the pieces together to be able to do that. And so what we want to be looking to do is to be developing a conscience, developing guardrails to take a beat before we get to a point where we don't have the opportunity to roll it back into a more contained environment. So the example that was given that was hopeful, actually, was about the nuclear bomb, and that technology certainly has the potential to allow us to destroy ourselves. And we were able to rein it in. We were able to make laws, make agreements that we would rein it in. And apparently there was a movie called The Day After, I think they said in 1984, that was shown to over 100 million people. in the US. And then in 1987, it was shown to millions of people in Russia. And that film woke people up to say, wait a second, we're playing with something that's way beyond our capabilities. And we need to put on some guardrails about it. And so that's the case with AI too, because we're playing with something that's way more powerful than nuclear bombs or hydrogen bombs. So we're talking about language, we're talking about concepts, conceptualization, we're talking about connectedness in the universe. And we're at this remarkable moment in time. Dido, you are so fabulous. Thank you. Dido found an IMDb article on the movie The Day After, which is from a long time ago, but I happen to have grown up in that era where we would hide under desks. We would have these drills where we would hide under desk in case of a nuclear attack. Like that would have made a difference, right? But kind of crazy stuff. But it was a real threat, and we face that threat currently too. In fact, anyway, we get to be alive in this remarkable time of massive transformation of consciousness, of awareness of the planet, where we have the potentials for destruction and salvation all around us, all at the same time. So I don't know if this is true, and if it's not, I apologize if it's offensive. But I had heard that there is a Chinese curse, and that is, may you live in interesting times, and that we most certainly do. So that's it for today. Lots to think about, lots to check into. And as always, I'm so grateful to you for the opportunity to share these explorations together. So I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live each weekday morning here on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I invite you to check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network and Enlightened World Living. And until next time, so much love to you.